Hello and welcome. You're watching Financial Quotient, a conversation about women and their money. I'm Sumaira Abdi. Today, we begin with the story of Vandana Talwani, a Mumbai resident who has truly taken a 360-degree charge of her money matters.
Hi, this is Vandana Talwani. I'm currently heading the HR department for Havas Group India. I'm a single child, I'm a single woman, I own assets. I think it was very important for my mom as my main dependent to know what are the assets that she will have access to in case something has to go wrong. So from that point of view, I decided to have a will. So honestly, it's not that difficult to create a will once you have a format. It's readily available online. I've obviously made a list of all my assets. I decided who's going to be the beneficiary, who's going to execute my will, who are the witnesses, and so on. Once we had all that ready, we got it ready, got it signed. I made sure there were multiple copies of the will, which we made available to, everybody has a copy of it, including myself. It's not enough to just invest your money randomly here and there. I think it's very important to understand what your long-term goals are. What is your mid-term goal? What's your short-term goals? So I think it's as important to plan for a retirement as it is, to plan and invest for a dream car, something that you've always wanted to have, maybe in the next 2-3 years. So I think it's also important to plan and invest for enjoying life as much as it is for retirement purposes.
Well, it's a pleasure to hear Vandana speak, and not just about her investments, but also importantly about estate planning, which is our theme for today. As more and more women enter the workforce and accumulate assets, it's becoming integral now for them to ensure their smooth transition as well. Latest data suggests that 82,000 crores of funds in financial securities lie unclaimed. One of the most common causes could be that following the death of the investor, the family was not aware of these investments in the first place and therefore could not claim it. So let me invite two experts who can break down the best practices in estate planning. We're joined today by Mrin Agarwal, who's a financial educator and director at FinSafe India, and Abhishek Mathur, partner at L&L Partners. So thank you so much, Mrin and Abhishek, for joining in to talk about this, at least what I consider to be a very, very important topic. Mrin, first things first, from a wealth perspective, which is the ideal way to go about estate planning, especially for women?
Good afternoon, Sumaira. Always nice to be here on your show. And I think it's a really, really important topic for women, estate planning, because when I look all around, women are hardly involved in managing finances. And I would say that even fewer women are really involved in estate planning. So it was nice to see Vandana's video and how she shared her financial assets with her family. So I think, the first step really is to be involved in financial planning and to be aware of the financial assets of the family. And of course, Abhishek is going to talk more about the succession laws. But, one of the things that's always struck me is that in the laws, they're very, very sided towards the spouse's family as far as the man's family, and not really towards the women's own family. And I think that should be reason enough for women to really, first of all, get involved in this in a big way. The start of estate planning is really putting down all your assets and figuring out how you want to bequeath them. But you also need to remember that assets that are jointly held are not yours to bequeath the way you want to. So, of course, you can only give away the part of it that is owned by you. But of course, you need to put a thought as to how are the singly held and how are the jointly held assets going to be given out. The other thing is, of course, with gold jewelry, what I normally see is that people don't actually have a list. So I think it's very important to itemize all the things, especially jewelry. So make a list of everything that you own and how do you want to really give it out. And in many cases, what I've seen is that on the death, it's really left on the descendants to decide like who's going to take what. Of course, I think the most important part is going to be to try and figure out who is going to be the executor, who's going to be the guardian. And, not only from the fact that it should be someone you trust, but more importantly, the executor of your will, or if you're going to have a guardian for minor children, whether they are going to be able to actually manage your financial assets. So you might be very good at managing stocks or financial assets, but the executor may not have the inclination or may not even have the time to manage it. So certainly, these are other factors you need to keep in mind. If you are a business owner, remember, personal liabilities still need to be paid off by your heirs. So if you have loans in your personal name, even if they were taken for a business, right, they still need to be paid off by your heirs. So you need to figure that piece out, that what's going to happen on your death. Who does the business go to? Who's going to take care of the loans? And I think, what all of this brings me to is to say that you really need to simplify your financial life at every age. People have 20, 30 stocks, 10, 15 mutual funds, 5, 10 policies. All of this is very complicated. Add to that properties. If you're going to have 3, 4 properties, all of this becomes very, very complicated and very difficult for the heirs, for the executor to actually manage. So I think from a financial perspective, the first thing is to see, how can I simplify my financial life before I even write a will, honestly?
No, absolutely, and which is why it's important to get the family involved in the financial planning as early as possible, so that they're not left grappling, at a juncture where they should be involved otherwise. Abhishek, legally, what are the first steps for someone to keep in mind, especially women?
Thank you, Sumaira, for having me on your show. So let's understand this. Essentially, estate planning is about devising the means to ensure that your estate, which is all your wealth, asset, property, whatever you call it, effectively gets transferred to your identified successors, the beneficiaries that you specifically want, the people who you specifically want to benefit from your estate after you. So broadly, if you were talking of the first steps, let's break it into three parts. Of course, first is the identification of the property as such. Secondly is the clear identification of the successor or the beneficiaries. And thirdly, the instrumentality which you would want to deploy to ensure this effective transfer of your assets to the next generation. When we talk about identification of the property in the context of women, it's very important. Property essentially can be everything. It's your removable property, various movable of property, your personal items like jewelry, vehicles, etc. It could be, in the nature of your stocks, investment, shares. It could also be in the nature of your contractual rights and benefits out of business. If you have a share in business, if you have a share in a partnership, all of that becomes your asset. And there are ways and means of ensuring that the benefit of all of that accrues to your successors. In the context of women, it is important to understand their entitlement to the ancestral property. While the laws governing ancestral property and the inheritance of ancestral property are different from people coming from different faiths, but largely, let's see that now, essentially, at least in the case of Hindu women, largely, they are at par with the male successors in the ancestral property, particularly after the 2005 amendment of the Hindu Succession Act. And so they need to be cognizant of their entitlements so that they can also transfer that benefit to their next generation. Then the next point, as I said, identification of your beneficiary. So the whole purpose of estate planning as against, intestate succession, which means succession by virtue of the provisions of law. Law itself prescribes after you who will be the successors of your property. But estate planning is to ensure that you mold it to the beneficiaries that you want. So have a clear identification of the beneficiaries that you want the properties to vest into. And thirdly, the instrumentality that you use. So one of the most commonly known instrumentalities is, of course, the will. A will basically takes effect upon after your life, and then it vests your assets into your successors, whoever has been identified as the successors. But another important tool to look into is setting up of a trust. And there are various merits and demerits between wills and trust. Just broadly speaking, a will at times, if it is disputed by certain legal heirs or relatives of or some other person interested, the effect effectivity of the coming into effect of the will can get delayed because of the legal proceedings. However, a trust does not necessarily suffer from these problems. The trust, on the other side, has the demerit that it could be costly, a little complicated, and it essentially vests the property within your lifetime, from you to the trust. And therefore, the flexibility element, as is available in a will, is not so much available in a trust. So broadly, these are the first few steps one should consider when one looks into it.
Yeah, and a trust would also, I suppose, ring fence the heirs against any liability. But it's time for us to take a very quick break on Financial Quotient. Our guests are going to stay on with us. We'll be right back with more. Hi, welcome back. You're watching Financial Quotient. With us today, we have Mrina Agarwal, financial educator and director at FinSafe India, and Abhishek Mathur, partner at L&L Partners. And together, our experts are helping us understand estate planning, or the process by which you want to pass on your wealth, your assets, your estate to the next generation. So we've spoken a little bit about, what are the first steps. Now we want to know some more. So Abhishek, what are the technicalities of a will? I mean, you spoke about a will and trust just before the break. And what are the things that somebody should take care of in this regard?
Yeah, so the will essentially, well, in a way it's simple. In another way, there are certain technical requirements to it. So it does not necessarily have to be in any format. It need not be on a stamp paper. It need not be registered. So you can write your will simply on a plain piece of paper. What are the essential factors to a will? Essential factors to your will is that your intent has to be clear, that this is your will whereby you want to vest a property to the persons that you have identified. The properties must be clearly identified. And very important is that there's a process which is called attestation. You must sign your will in the presence of at least 2 witnesses. Then the few other things to be taken care of is registration, while not compulsory, is advisable because it gives a certain, it protects the will again in cases of certain challenges to the will. And the will has to be your last and final will, essentially meaning that the will can always be superseded by a subsequent will. And therefore, it is advisable that you mention that this is your last and final will. In terms of procedure, one of the important things to take care of is a probate of the will. A will may require probate, which is essentially a process of certification by a court of law for administration of the will. So the executor of the will has to approach a court of law, seek a probate of the will, and the court at that stage invites objections or it issues notices to the legal heirs, and if there are any objections, the will can be challenged and disputed. And thereupon, once the court is satisfied that the will qualifies and it is a genuine will which is made properly and etc., then the will is probated, thereby then it can be administered. So it's best, while there are no specific formalities as I discussed earlier, it is best that you do take a professional help in drafting a will, particularly if your assets and your beneficiaries are of various nature. And secondly, make sure that you keep updating your will as there is change in asset, if you buy new assets or sell off old assets, or there is a change in beneficiary. It is important who can execute a will. You have to be a major, you have to be of sound mind to execute a will. And it is important that the will must be executed out of your free will and desire, not under coercion or undue influence. So these are some of the things to be taken care of while executing a will.
Okay. Mrind, the other thing that I want to ask about, and, it is more common than we think, which is that people, may not have their documents in order, right? Now, I have some faint idea that, my mom had some property, may not have the papers handy. So how can, this documentation process be made more scientific? I mean, is there a way to sort of keep it all together?
Well, you need to have a financial assets repository. And in any case, to make a will, you will have to have a list of all the assets. So I think the first thing is to work with your spouse or partner and create this repository, which is really, all the bank accounts, all the investments, insurance, liabilities, credit cards, everything that you own. Write it down in maybe Excel spreadsheet where you write down the bank that you have it in, what is the account number, what is the mode of holding, is it either a survivor, single, joint, is there a nominee, the login ID, password, of course, is relevant. And everything in one place. Of course, it needs to be password protected, and you need to ensure that you're protecting that data out there. The other thing is to try, from a financial angle, it's, as I mentioned, about simplifying financial life. So I think it's really important that as you go along, you probably need to start thinking as to how you can simplify your life. So for example, if you have properties and if your children are abroad, and these days, in any case, children do not want properties. So maybe you look at exiting some of these properties and start moving into simpler instruments. Try to digitize all of your statements. There is this NSDL cash statement, which shows all securities like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, sovereign gold bond scheme in one statement, and you get it every month. So try to digitize your statements so that you have less physical papers. And of course, the NSDL cash is also going to actually help you keep track of your investments as well in one place. And for all of this, I know this sounds really silly, but for all of this, you need to have just one email ID. this is the other thing, that we all complicate our lives. Like, we'll give one email ID somewhere else, we'll give one email ID for another investment. But, you need to have one email ID for all of your financial transactions. And honestly, Sumaira, I mean, I have just recently gone through the process of writing a will. And what came across to me, even as a financial advisor, is that most of us have very complicated lives. I have seen it with clients as well. When clients pass away, how difficult it is for families to, first of all, figure out what's there. So I think the two key things is have your financial documentation in order, tell your family members about it, and always remember, they might not be as proficient as you in managing money. So certainly try to get them educated, and
absolutely
keep life simple.
Absolutely. Keep life simple. Mrin, Abhishek, thank you so much for joining in and for explaining the very basics of estate planning. I'm sure, there are a lot more details as well. So I hope everybody who's been watching, if you're intrigued, please do go and read up, more on this. It will be very, very helpful. So let's just quickly tell you, what are the key takeaways from this show on estate planning. One, of course, and which is very, very important, is that you must itemize all the assets and you must plan the distribution, right? Don't leave any ambiguity over there. There must be clear identification of successors and beneficiaries, and this must be done by you, by the person who's executing that will. And, this is something which will help your heirs very, very much. You must also identify, like Abhishek said, whether the transfer is going to happen through a will or a trust. So there must also be clarity on how you want to do this. Both will have pros and cons as well. And finally, the intent to bequeath must be clear. The language must be totally unambiguous. There must be no scope for confusion. So I hope you have enjoyed watching this as much as we enjoyed bringing you this information. And as we wind down on the show, we leave you with some thoughts from one of our women who inspire. Thanks for watching.
As a woman, we firstly need to feel strong, think strong, and be strong, right? It's a very big word, but not an easy word, especially from the kind of history we all come from. Women in India have been known as Shakti, right? They are being known as a power. But do we really think of it ourselves? We can think of it ourselves if we work a bit strategically. Imagine as women, we are crafting strategies for companies. We are working on different analysis in the companies. Why are we not spending time in doing a financial analysis? That's very important. We need to put down our career goals. We need to put down our life goals. We need to put our aspirations. What is it that we like to learn? If we like to travel, if we have to pursue some hobbies, or we would like to do something for our family, all of that has a lot of connects with finance. So it's important that as women we be conscious about it. And I am confident that with a proper planning and with some structured efforts, it will definitely yield results. There are different investment avenues depending on the kind of risk appetite a woman has, and depending on her lifestyle and the kind of things which she likes to aspire. I'm sure if she dreams of it, she can achieve it.